You're watching PM Agenda. Good to have you with us this afternoon. Let's bring in our Monday afternoon panel of political strategist Grahame Morris here with me in the studio, Bruce Hawker in the news centre. We haven't had a chance to talk to you both since the Clive Palmer moment last week. It's been a big question mark what the new Senate, where the Palmer United Party has the balance of power, will mean in practice. Bruce Hawker, first to you. Did we get a sense of that, do you think, with the Clive and Al Gore show last week? What did you make of it, and what does it mean for the Abbott government?
Well, in a way, I thought it was even more confusing, David, because I didn't really expect that Al Gore and Clive Palmer would ever be standing on the same rostrum together. But it just goes to show that this guy, has remarkable and unpredictable reach. I think just to compare him to One Nation, as a lot of people have tried to do, in the sort of people that he's going to attract, is probably harder to justify. I think he's going to be a much more complex character than that, and therefore more difficult to deal with.
Yeah, he's no One Nation, Grahame. That's for sure. But what do you think that event told us about the way he's going to approach balance of power, and whether he is going to be a friend of the government or not? Because in the end, he's giving Tony Abbott what he wants on the carbon tax.
Well, I think Tony Abbott would have half a gold star stuck in his diary for last week. The other half comes when we actually see what Clive does, or his senators next week. Look, I've been involved in some political stunts over the years, but I thought that one was an absolute doozy. Clive Palmer comes to town, he brings his own wind-up dinosaur with this wonderful name named Al Gore. Great name for a dinosaur. and this bloke is a complete log. I met him 17 years ago and he hadn't improved by the look of it. I don't know what he thought he was doing there. He was standing beside one of Australia's coal magnates, a nickel king, not the greatest sort of advocate of climate change, put his arm around him and says, "On you, mate."
But it was a great coup for Clive Palmer.
Wonderful stunt. It confused half the journalists in the country. They didn't know whether he was for Arthur or Martha or where he was.
That's true. Let me ask you, though, about the approach the government should take towards Clive Palmer, Grahame. There are a couple of schools of thought here, whether they should cosy up to him and try and be nice and get his support on what they need his support for, or take a more aggressive approach with him.
No, well, look, I don't think it's either or. I think the first one is you talk to Clive, you talk to his people, you go through things rationally, you go through the front door and say, look, this is what we want to do. What do you make of that? And you do that for a while on each issue, but each time, if they say, yeah, fine, if not, then you kick in the back door.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't come out swinging straight away. Conversely, nor should anyone expect that the government is going to have, 3 or 4 years of just cuddling Clive. Not real.
What do you expect the government will do, Bruce?
I think they'll try to catch the fly with honey rather than the other way around. And I think that's probably the way to go. I think they really do need to sit down and talk sensibly to him, not to try to go out and attack and humiliate him. I don't think he's the sort of guy who's going to respond particularly well to that or be off-put by it. So his challenge, I think, though, will be to keep his own team together. And there have been some signs in the last couple of days that they're not all necessarily going to speak with the one voice because they represent different state interests.
I should point out, Jackie Lambie's put out a statement denying those reports that she's at odds at all on their position with the renewable energy target. But you're right, that will be the key thing to watch. How well they do stick together, and also this arrangement with Ricky Muir of the Motoring Enthusiast Party as well, how solid that ends up being when it comes to votes on the floor. Look, let's move it on. A lot of reviews and white papers underway and soon to be underway. Another one, apart from the welfare review we've just been talking about, was the Federation white paper that the Prime Minister's launched or given more detail on over the weekend. Grahame, there's a whole bunch of things when it comes to federal-state relations that could be cleaned up, tidied up, made a lot more effective. The one issue that seems to be the big picture problem for the states is their ability to raise money. That's been eroded over the years. Now this suggestion that they should have some influence over income tax setting, that you could have a different income tax rate in Victoria to Queensland and Western Australia to New South Wales. What do you think of that?
Well, it's certainly hard. I think we've had a couple of elections. Neville Wran won an election once saying no state tax. He didn't want it. Look, I hope when this comes out that we at least have a half sensible discussion. You know, we know at the moment, if you devolve power back to the states, you give them a heap of health, a heap of education, there's got to be some money there. But there's no money in the federal coffers. Now, one way you could do it, and I've talked to the states about this, is say you had the 30% tax rate, then maybe the feds take 25% of that, and the states argue about the remaining 75%. It may well be Tasmania says, we need business to come to the island, so we'll have a low percentage. New South Wales and Western Australia, lots of infrastructure, they might say, well, we'll tax higher. So you'd have a bit of competition. Will it actually happen? Well, we've been having this debate for 50 years, so long. I just hope when it happens we progress this further rather than, you know, a little like the social security stuff this today. You know, the opposition's jumping up and down and growling and, blimey, it's only 24 hours old. Let's have a look at it. Let's have a look at tax reform. Let's have a look at social security reform. Let's have a look at the Federation and have a yarn and see if we can do better.
Bruce, that's right, isn't it? It's worth discussing these things. You know, some of them might be far-fetched, but it would be certainly a very interesting development, wouldn't it, if states could have a bit more of a say over tax settings in their own jurisdiction?
Oh, it sure would. I mean, the states handed over their taxing powers to the Commonwealth during the Second World War, and I think that was one of the happiest days of their collective life when they did so. That's a problem now for the Commonwealth, not them. But, of course, they do need a lot of money to keep these services going. It's all very well for Tony Abbott to go out there and say, oh, you know, we're going to devolve responsibility for health and education and everything else to the states and starve them then of any resources, because that just is really a code for saying we want to introduce an increase in the GST or broaden the base of the GST. All this is about that at the end of the day. You know, they can muck around and try to pretend it's something other than that, and that's trying to make the relationships between the jurisdictions more better and so forth, but it's not. What they're really saying is we want to raise more money out of the Australian public by increasing what is basically an unfair tax, because it gives, it taxes millionaires buying a loaf of bread at the same rate that it taxes a pensioner. So that's why, of course, Labor's opposed to increasing the GST. So this is all about that and nothing else. The states aren't going to have their own state income taxes returned to them. That's just not going to happen in my view. But what I think they're going to try to do is put the screws on them more and more until they finally say, can we please have an increase in the GST? And by the way, most of the states don't care that anyway, because they'll blame the Commonwealth for it. That's why we're playing this elaborate, silly game right now.
I want to turn now to finally to what has been one of the most extraordinary political turnarounds, if the news poll is right. This poll on Queensland's state of play at the moment. Remember, of course, that Campbell Newman won in the biggest landslide in Australian history. He won, more seats than any government has. Now, that doesn't tell you which one's which, but I can tell you that the primary vote there has gone down 8 points for the LNP, and after preferences, the LNP, the Newman government, is now actually behind Labor, which has only 8 seats in Parliament. Again, that doesn't tell you which party's which. Apologies for that. But the Labor vote hasn't actually gone up a hell of a lot. The Palmer United Party vote, Grahame, has to something like 24%. What's going on there? Why is Campbell Newman's government tanked?
This is Queensland. Look, isn't politics funny? In New South Wales, the O'Farrell government got a whack around the ears because people said it reacted too slowly, not quickly enough, didn't do enough. Campbell Newman's getting a whack around the ears because he went probably too far too fast.
With the job cuts.
Look, it's 9 months. 9 months till the election. I suspect the government will be all right. But the big problem, and this is a serious problem, is the Premier's own seat of Ashgrove. It's sort of doctors' wives, solar panels, that sort of thing. It may well be that Clive Palmer gets, say, 25%, a third of the vote, 25%, third of the vote. Under optional preferential, that might not go back to the Premier. And Oh, that'd be the worst of all worlds.
It'd be funny. He's one term in Parliament as Premier.
But that'd be a bloody shocker.
Bruce, but what do you make of this poll?
Look, I think it's a testament to the good sense of the Queensland public. When governments cut and cut really hard, this is the sort of reaction you can expect from them. And this is precisely what the Newman government's done. It's cut jobs, it's cut education, it's cut health, and people are.
He'll still win, though, won't he, next year?
Well, I'm not sure about that. I mean, you would expect that given the size of the majority that he would hold on, but a lot's going to come down ultimately to the way in which people up there do view the Palmer United Party, how much money Palmer's going to put into that election campaign. Now, whilst it's not a one nation, and we just made those distinctions clear, there is certainly a tendency in the electorate to come, particularly in Queensland, to come to these sort of larger-than-life characters who are very populist and give them real support in the election. I wouldn't be surprised if they won a swag of seats just like Hanson did in 1998.
That's right. He's the Joe Bianchi-Peterson, Pauline Hanson love child.
Right, that's a disturbing thought. We're going to have to wrap things up there, Grahame Morris, Bruce Hawker. Good to talk to both of you. Thanks for that. We'll take a break. Back with more on PM Agenda.
To me, income protection insurance